So, good afternoon, everyone. Myself, CA Nitin Bansal, and I'm the convener for today's session. And I would like to welcome CA Akash sir, Chairman Jaipur Branch, CA Lokesh sir, past Chairman Jaipur Branch, and today's eminent speaker with us, CA Gori Methi ma'am. And I would also like to thank Jaipur branch for conducting these sessions on the regular interval. And the most important thing is that these sessions are just not based on the conventional topics, but on the new dimensions of the CA practice also, which is very helpful for the members, I think. So I would request the Akash sir to address the members, please. Akash sir, please.
Thank you, Nitin. And I will सभी members का wholeheartedly welcome करता हूँ इस VCM this virtual VCM on role of chartered accountancy in accelerating growth of startups. And आज का session मेरे लिए बहुत important लगता है कि probably this session would be my last session where I'm addressing the members of Jaipur branch as a chairman of Jaipur branch. So I feel highly privileged, on welcoming, giving a welcome note of this session. And I won't take much time, but मैं 2 से 4 मिनट लूंगा कि during this entire journey, हमने कभी सोचा नहीं था कि ये journey इतनी special रहेगी. And इतने ups and downs होते हुए भी we have एक अलग ढंग एक अलग एक्सपीरियंस था, है ना. ये हमने जो इनकलकेट हुआ है, इनकलकेट किया है हमने. आई फेल्ट मतलब शायद एक्सप्रेस नहीं कर सकता मैं वर्ड्स में क्या मेरी जर्नी रही है ड्यूरिंग दिस होल ईयर. हमने हर तरह का पीरियड देखा. राइट, जब हमने स्टार्ट किया था हमने ये सोचा था कि दो कोविड फेज खत्म हो गया एंड विल बी फोकसिंग मोर ऑन फिजिकल एक्टिविटीज. बट वापस से मार्च एंड आते आते वापस से कोविड आ गया एंड जो एंटायर जो हमारा पूरा फेज था वो पूरा कोविड में चला गया. एंड सो ऑन से लेटर ऑन जब तक आया तो कुछ इंसिडेंट्स ऐसे हो गए कि हम जयपुर ब्रांच में फिजिकल एक्टिविटी कर नहीं पाए. सो आई एम एक्सट्रीमली सॉरी. एंड बट एक और न्यूज मैं शेयर करना चाहूंगा कि दिस इज द फर्स्ट टाइम जयपुर ब्रांच को CIRC में द मोस्ट हाईली रिकमेंडेड ब्रांच मिला है, बोथ इन सिकासा एंड प्लस CIRC. तो ये जयपुर ब्रांच की हिस्ट्री में फर्स्ट टाइम ऐसा है कि दोनों प्राइज अपन को एक साथ मिले हैं. तो एंड मैं मतलब ये दिस इंटायरली मेरा कुछ नहीं था, ये पूरी कमेटी मेंबर्स की, पूरे सातों की, प्लस हमारे रीजनल काउंसिल मेंबर्स, प्लस हमारे सेंट्रल काउंसिल मेंबर्स जिनके गाइडेंस में हम लोग हमेशा हर चीज आगे फॉलो करते हैं. स्पेशली प्रकाश शर्मा सर, प्रमोद सर एंड सतीश सर एंड हमारे रीजनल काउंसिल मेंबर अभिषेक जी, सचिन जी, दिनेश जी, प्लस माय एंटायर मैनेजमेंट कमेटी टीम. एंड मैं मतलब होल हार्टेडली थैंक यू बोलूंगा पूरी मैनेजमेंट कमेटी की. थ्रू आउट द ईयर पूरा सपोर्ट रहा सबका. एंड वी हैव बीन अचीविंग और माइलस्टोन्स हम आगे से आगे सारे अचीव करते रहे. एंड हम लोग का स्टार्टिंग से यही टारगेट था कि हम न्यू एवेन्यूज को टारगेट करें. हमने हमेशा यही ट्राई किया है कि अपार्ट फ्रॉम ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिस, ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिस के टॉपिक्स तो हम लेते ही आए हैं, बट अपार्ट फ्रॉम ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिस हमने हमेशा कोशिश करी कि हम न्यू एवेन्यूज के वर्चुअल मीटिंग्स और जो भी सेमिनार करते रहे. हमने IT पे करा, इंसॉल्वेंसी पे करा एंड अदर टॉपिक्स ऑल्सो. एंड इसी सीरीज में आज ये जो लास्ट सेशन एज अ चेयरमैन हमने जो कंडक्ट किया फॉर द चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट के बाद क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज है फॉर दिस स्टार्टअप. एंड इसके लिए मैं थैंक यू बोलना चाहूंगा गौरी मैम का, क्योंकि एक्सेप्टेड और जयपुर ब्रांच इन्विटेशन एंड उन्होंने शी इज एन एक्सीलेंट स्पीकर जो अपन आगे आप देखेंगे कि गौरी मैम अपने जैसे लेगी. एंड सो आई जस्ट मैं लास्ट में ये बोलूंगा थैंक यू टू ऑल द मेंबर्स, है ना. उन्होंने जिस तरीके से पूरा ध्यान रखा है हमारे जयपुर ब्रांच का एंड आगे भी वो ध्यान रखेंगे. मैं अब रीजन मेंबर बन जाऊँ तो वही सपोर्ट जिस तरीके से ड्यूरिंग द लास्ट ईयर, लास्ट 3 साल में हमारी कमेटी को मिला, वही सपोर्ट मैं चाहूंगा कि हम रीजनल काउंसिल मेंबर्स एज ए रीजनल काउंसिल मेंबर में इसी तरीके से काम करता रहूं. और आप लोग को विश्वास दिलाता हूँ कि जो मैं जिस काम के लिए आपने मुझे भेजा है उसको मैं काम को आगे से आगे पूरा अपनी मेहनत और जितना भी मेंबर्स के लिए मैं कर सकता हूँ ये है. So thank you very much. Over to Nitin.
Thank you very much, Akash sir, for your kind words. And Lokesh sir, you want to add something?
Nitin ji?
Okay, so I think we should move forward for today's topic. So, as sir said, our today's session is about role of chartered accountants in accelerating the growth of startups. So, as we can see that startups are daily emerging at the rapid phase, and young entrepreneurs are more and more interested in these areas. And even many of these startups have gained the status of unicorn also. So, but the primary concern is that at the beginning phase, these startups struggles with many problems, such as raising the funds from the market, either in the form of equity or in the debt, and complying various statutory compliances, getting the benefits of the government schemes and incentives, etc. So here the point is what we as a chartered accountant can deliver for the growth of these startups. And this is the focus area of the today's session. So to present this, we have with us a very eminent speaker from industry, CA Gauri Mathi ma'am, and she is currently working as a director in Admin Advisory Services Private Limited, and she was previously associated with SK FinCorp Limited and Deloitte as an assistant manager, and she is a qualified chartered accountant and completed her masters in financial management from Vlarik Business School, Belgium. And Gauri ma'am is also assisting RICO government of Rajasthan in promoting and channelizing the investments of the large business houses in the state, and she's also mentoring the startups and various incubation centers such as IIT Hyderabad, BeIncube, iStart on the financial literacy and fundraising. So ma'am is having very extensive experience in the startup ecosystem, I think. So without taking much time, I would hand over to Gauri ma'am to start the presentation. Over to you, ma'am, please.
Thanks a lot, Nitin, for such a warm introduction. And I would also like to thank CA Akash Virgotri sir and other committee members for giving me this opportunity to present my ideas on how a chartered accountant can play a significant role in accelerating growth of startups. I would so good afternoon to everyone who has joined this session. Hope everyone is doing fine. Now, before we proceed further with the, I'll just share the presentation first. Yeah. So is the presentation visible to everyone? Nitin?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. Now, before we proceed further on about this topic and start talking about this in detail, I would just like to brief about what is happening in the Indian startup ecosystem in general. So a recent study has published that around 60,000 startups have been registered in India under the Startup India portal, and 14,000 of them were registered in the year 2022 itself. So there is a 15 times growth in the number of startups that have been registered since the last 2 decades. So I would just like to know from everybody who is attending the session that are you aware about how many startups have been converted into unicorn in the year 2022 itself? So please feel free to reply on the chat box. I'll be waiting for the answers. If anybody has any clue, then please feel free to answer. Okay, fine. I cannot see the answers as such. Nitin, did you receive any answer?
Yes, there is one from Shubham. He's saying 3 or 4. One from Harshal. He's saying 8.
Okay.
Okay, and more from Neeraj and Vimal. They are saying around 90, 91.
Okay. So I think the number is nowhere close to the number of startups that have been converted into unicorns. So in the year 2022 itself, there are 44 startups that have been converted into unicorns. So till now, there are 90 startups that are converted into unicorns, but out of which 44 startups are from the year 2022 itself. So it's a huge number. So this number itself depicts that how the startup ecosystem is growing at a very rapid stage. And India has also become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world after US and China, with a valuation of around $300 billion, which depicts a very huge pace at which this industry is growing. So I just want to give a few examples of the startups that have converted into unicorn at a fast stage. For instance, everyone might have heard about Mensa. The startup was this startup raised its first round of equity, first round of funding immediately 6 months after the incorporation, and became unicorn in less than 1 year. So it's a huge achievement. And even the startups like Flipkart, Byju's, they have a very high valuation. So in nutshell, this startup ecosystem is growing at a very fast pace. And this is a message to all the chartered accountants that we really need to gear up to be a part of this rising wave and to provide our consultancy services, our guidance to these startups and accelerate our growth also. So now we will just start with our, so I'll just brief you about the content that we will be wait a minute. Yeah. So now I'll just brief you about the content that we will be discussing during our session. So firstly, we will discuss about the Indian startup ecosystem, then how the Rajasthan government is taking initiatives to promote the startup ecosystem in the state. We will also discuss about the incubators and accelerator programs. What are the difference between them? How they are boosting the startups. Then definitely we will talk about the role of chartered accountants specifically in the growth of these startups at different stages. So there are different stages of funding, angel round of funding, and different stages where the startup, where the chartered accountant plays an important role. Then there is a special focus on what are the initiatives taken for women entrepreneurs, and finally about how CAs are acting as mentors and investors to these startups. So now going forward, so Indian startup ecosystem, I've already briefed you about the startup ecosystem in the introduction. So there is an initiative of Government of India, that Startup India, that was launched on 16th January 2016. So the main focus of this initiative was to promote the startup ecosystem. And this was a 5-year flagship program. And under this initiative, so as we have discussed, till now 60,000 startups have been registered. And previously, like till 2021, 44,000 startups were registered. Now the table, as you can see, this table depicts the number of startups that are registered in each year. So there was a decline in the startups that were registered in the year 2021 due to obviously COVID. But then again, this number boomed to 14,000 startups in 2022. Now, as we can see, if we compare these number of startups registered in India with the number of startups that are registered in Rajasthan. So in comparison, the number of startups that are registered in Rajasthan is really low. So, so now the Rajasthan government, that's why Rajasthan government came with this policy to promote the startup ecosystem in Rajasthan. Now, we are also aware of the fact that Rajasthan is a hub for chartered accountants. So I think this promotion for a startup, like Rajasthan government initiative to promote the startup ecosystem, will also help, like chartered accountants can be a part of this strategy to promote this ecosystem. So in this slide, we will see that this, so as we were discussing previously, that Rajasthan is promoting the startup ecosystem in the state. So now we can see that this Rajasthan came up with the Rajasthan Startup and Investment Policy in the year 2015. So this policy was amended in 2017 and further amended in 2019. So this policy is a flagship initiative of a state government. So now again, this policy, under this policy, there was an incubation center that was developed in 2017, iStart. So the purpose of this incubation center was to provide the support services. So this was basically a physical space, and so all the startup founders can go to that space. They can utilize the support services that are provided by this incubation center, and they can so this really will be helpful to the startups in like in achieving their growth strategies. So under this flagship initiative, there were like 1,500 startups are registered till now under this initiative. So this program is again for a 5-year duration, and this program aims to provide 10 accelerator programs and employment opportunities to 1 lakh employees. Then under this program, the nodal agency is DPII, Department of IT and Communication is the nodal agency. So the work of this nodal agency is to mobilize the fund. So what has been done is under this startup, under this initiative, 500 crore fund has been kept aside, and through this nodal agency, this fund will be distributed to all the startups under Rajasthan Innovation and Vision Fund. So this is the so this is how the Rajasthan government is promoting startup ecosystem in the state. And also one interesting fact that Rajasthan government came up with its own venture capital, RSVC, to provide again the funding facilities to startups in Rajasthan. So this was about policy. Now we will discuss in detail about the incubators, startup incubators in India. So what is an incubator? So an incubator is basically a collaborative program that is designed, developed by in association with all the high-level academic institutions like IIM, ISB. So all the top technological institutions are developing these incubators. And so the idea of the incubation program is again to provide a boost to the startup ecosystem. So there has been a 15 times increase again in the number of incubators that are registered since the last 2 decades. And in totality, there are more than 300 incubators in the country. So a special, if we look at the number of incubators registered all over the country, then we can see that the number of incubators registered in the southern part is comparatively high. And this also coincides with the fact that the number of startups that have been that have emerged from the southern part is comparatively high in totality. But then recently, there is also a paradigm shift in the number of incubators, in the number of startups and incubators towards the northern region as well. Now, so just a question, this is a question to ourselves, like how many of us are really associated with these incubator programs? Because, so I'll tell you from my personal experience, like we have been providing mentorship to certain incubators like IIT, BNQ. So a chartered accountant can really be associated with these incubator programs and provide mentorship to startups in achieving their growth strategy. So, because these incubators really require a finance expert in assisting them in providing, because as they provide this support services to startups, so they need a financial expert, they need a chartered accountant who can assist them in providing these mentorship to startups. Now, so in general, if there are 2 programs through which a startup, through which a boost is provided to startups, that is through incubation and accelerator program. So we have already discussed about the incubation, but when we talk about the accelerator program, so again the accelerator program is again the same thing. They are also an academic training programs which provide a boost to the startup, which provide support services to the startups. So there's a very thin line of difference between incubators and accelerators. So incubators are more of a physical, like they have a physical space where a startup founders and employees can go and work. They can share their ideas. They can always, like, there is a physical support services that is provided through these incubators. there is a rolling, they also have a fixed like rolling admissions, like fees. They charge the fixed fees for using the facilities. But accelerators are more of a fixed duration training programs. And the idea of both the incubators and accelerators is to provide training, mentorship, business support services to these startups, which ultimately helps in their growth, in achieving the desired growth. But there's also one interesting fact that sometimes these incubators and accelerators also provide a seed funding to these startups. But it's not that easy to get registered in these incubators and accelerator programs. So to register in these incubators and accelerator programs, startup needs to qualify certain criteria. Not all the startups can easily register in these programs. For example, some of the examples of incubator programs are iStart, which we already mentioned before, a Rajasthan government startup. Then Y Combinator is an accelerator program. So ClearTex is one of the startups which got the acceleration from Y Combinator, and like everyone knows where it reached. So basically, to register in these startups, we have like the startups really have to fall in that criteria of selections. So from my personal experience also, like I know about IIT Hyderabad incubation program. So there were 200 applications filed in that incubator, but only 25 of them got registered. So this is the selection criteria is really tough. So, but then, so now in this, we can see there are some top incubation center and accelerator programs of the country, like Villargo, GSF Accelerator, CIIE, Indian Angel Networks. So if we look at these all are from either IIMs, IITs, so these are all are from top technological institutes of the country. Then again, it is important that as finance professionals, we should really be connected to these incubation and accelerator programs so that we can touch the startups, we can approach the startups at a very young age. We can understand what are the problems that the startup faces when they are young, and how we can be a solution provider to those startups. So this is the idea of being connected to these incubation and accelerator programs. So now we will move on to the next part of our presentation, which is what is the role of a chartered accountant in the growth of the in this entire startup ecosystem. So now so as the slide suggests, chartered accountants as virtual CFO. So normally we all are aware that chartered accountants are, so normally we are aware that a startup founder is mainly from a technological background. So here a chartered accountant can really play an important role in providing all the other support services to a startup. So in this slide, we have listed down certain services that can be provided by a chartered accountant at a very young stage to a startup. So for instance, first is registration of entity. So while whenever any startup gets any idea, so at the very idea stage itself, when that idea is converted into any so when a startup, I just need a minute break. I just want to. Yeah, okay. So I'll just resume. So when basically when a founder has an idea about a startup, and they go to register that startup, so a chartered accountant plays an important role in identifying and selecting the type of entity where in which form that startup should be registered. For instance, there are different stages of a startup, whether it is at a proof of concept stage, prototype stage. So based on the stage, the type of entity would be selected. Like if it is at a proof of concept stage, then it might be registered at a one-person company or a sole proprietorship company or a partnership firm. So depending on the stage, the entity would be selected. So a startup really needs a finance expert or chartered accountant to understand in which form that entity should be registered, and then further registering it under Startup India portal and getting the DPIIT recognition, the benefits of which we will discuss in the next slide. Then selection of accounting platform. So normally what happens in case of a startup is that the focus is entirely on the business side, but in that focus they tend to ignore the accounting side of the company, which is really important, because what happens is if the books of accounts are not maintained in a proper way, or if the accounting platform, correct accounting platform is not selected, then it really impacts how it doesn't depict the true and correct picture of the finance of the company. So they need to get up. They really need to get that expertise of a finance professional in selecting that accounting platform, which depicts a true picture of the books of accounts. Then the third is preparation of financial models. So preparation of financial model is something that chartered accountants have been doing since a long time. So it's like they were preparing financial models, and they were based on the traditional practices. But now, due to a shift in the ecosystem, as the startups have disrupted this entire ecosystem, so the preparation of financial models, the assumptions that shall be taken in preparing those financial models need to be shifted. They also need to be shifted. For instance, now if any startup develops an app, so the number of downloads that happens when that app is developed, then a number of clicks, number of views. So there are really different criteria for making those financial models, making those business assumptions. So for preparation of that financial model, a startup needs a financial expert who can understand the business in detail, who can understand it in detail and make those financial models based on those strong assumptions. Then again, valuation reports. So we all are aware about the valuation, about the startup valuations, how time and again those valuation changes. So valuation report is required by a startup again and again, because whenever they go for any round of funding, valuation report is something that is must. And normally valuation is expected from a registered valuer or a merchant banker. So a chartered accountant can be a registered valuer itself, and if he is not a registered valuer, then they can also, like, for analyzing those valuation reports, their correctness, also a startup needs a finance expert who can understand those valuations. Then shareholding structure and agreements. So normally a shareholding structure is defined between the founders of the company internally itself, but sometimes they might not be able to reach a conclusion that how the shareholders' shares should be divided amongst them. So in that case, they might need an opinion about how the shares should be divided based on the experience of the founders, based on their educational qualification, their contribution in the company. So there can be different criteria on which they might need a finance expert's opinion. Then hiring a senior level position. So again, normally what happens is that so whenever a new or a senior level position is filled in a startup, then they do consult a chartered accountant for helping them in finding the right person at the right time for the right position. So for example, CXOs and all. So initially the startups do not have that much fund to spare to keep that to fill in that senior level position. So they might need their opinions in finding the right candidate for them. Then about the ESOPs. So it is a very common practice for a startup to issue ESOPs to employees in order to retain them, in order to make them a part of their company, to give that ownership to that employee, belongingness and everything. So it is a very common practice. So in this case, a CA is required to help them analyze to whom the ESOPs shall be issued, at what prices they should be issued, what should be the vesting period, what exercise price, whether it should be issued at a nominal price or a strike price. So they might require a policy for that, that how they should be issued. And also, most importantly, it is important for a chartered accountant to make the startup founders realize that issuance of ESOP is like the real impact of issuance of ESOP is quite high, because ultimately it leads to dilution of equity in the future. So they should be issued in a very systematic manner, and by taking that into consideration. Then lastly, the most important role of a CA is in fundraising for a startup. So fundraising is undoubtedly the most important activity. And for fundraising, a company needs to be geared up properly. Investor decks should be prepared. They should be in line. So, and for preparing those investor decks, it is a lot of brainstorming that has to be done, because they depict the complete picture of the company, what has been their growth trajectory, how they have what all steps they have taken. So that brainstorming, you really need some expert opinions and everything. So this is in a nutshell where a chartered accountant can help a startup as a virtual CFO, can play a role of a virtual CFO. Now, so out of some of these services, we will discuss in detail in the slides below. But this is a brief picture of how a CS can add value to a startup. So now, stages of startup. So there are different stages of startup. Proof of concept stage is the stage at which the startup, at which there is just an idea. So startup is at an ideation stage. Then based on that idea, a prototype is developed, product trials are done, go-to-market strategy is defined, and finally the revenue model and commercialization takes place. So as we were discussing it earlier, so a CA plays an important role in selecting the type of entity based on the stage of the startup, and then conducting the further registration under Startup India. So for those registration, for all those documentation, an expert is again required by a startup. Now, once the startup is registered in the Startup India portal, the next step is that they need to get this DPIIT recognition. So, so there are a lot of benefits that are provided by government to startups, but these benefits cannot be availed until and unless they have this DPIIT recognition. So this is a very important step after registration in the Startup India portal. Now, we are also talking about a list of benefits that are available after DPIIT recognition. For instance, access to high quality intellectual property services. So in this case, once a startup has a DPIIT recognition, they get 80% rebate in patent and 50% rebate in trademark filing fees. Then there are relaxation in public procurement norms. So whenever there is any government order, tender, work orders, so a startup gets a privilege. A startup which is recognized under DPIIT recognition gets a privilege and can avail gets a privilege in availing these government orders in comparison to other startups or companies. Then also the whole idea of this portal is to make it easier, the compliance and everything easier for any startups. That's why under the labor laws and environmental laws, self-certification of a startup is also acceptable. Then we're also aware that not all the startups make it to a success. So there are certain startups which are not able to make it viable and they want to close the company. So again, the easy compliance is the motto of this. So again, easy winding of the company is also provided to those startups without with less legal formalities. Then access to funds of funds. So as we were discussing about the Startup India initiative before, so under that Startup India initiative, a 10,000 corpus fund has been kept aside for providing funding facilities to startups. But to access that fund, a DPIIT recognition is necessary. So this about this fund we will discuss in detail later on. Then there are also tax exemption for 3 consecutive years under Section 80 IAC out of the 7 years. And there are also some other benefits that we might not have covered in this slide. So the DPIIT recognition benefits are not limited to these benefits. There are certain set of other benefits which are not covered here. But the idea is that to get this recognition and registration is very important, and a CA can play a key role in making sure that all the startups are aware about these benefits and getting their registration done. So this is a very important role. This is basically the first key role that a CA has to play to make that startup recognized in the portal and getting availing these benefits. So now stages of funding and schemes applicable. So now, as we all know, the in brief, I'll just introduce about the ecosystem, how the fund is raised. So firstly, the seed funding round is done. Then as the startup grows, later on, there are different series A, B, C, D, E funding. And then finally, it provides exit to, as a part of an exit strategy, IPO is done. So now at different stages, there are different government schemes that are provided to in order to fund these startups. So we will discuss about those schemes now. So at a seed fund round, a startup can avail a government, can go for a government scheme or can go to private players. So there is a specific Startup India seed fund scheme of a government which aims to provide seed capital to the startups. So under this scheme, 900 crores fund has been kept aside. So the idea of the scheme is to provide funds to 3,600 entrepreneurs through 300 incubators. So mainly this funding is provided through incubation centers only. Now there is also one concept of soft loans which are granted through accelerators and incubations. Now what is a soft loan? So soft loan is provided to a startup through incubators. So these loans have a comparatively less interest rate in comparison to other loans. And these loans are also flexible because these loans can be converted into an equity or they can be waived off. So depending on the condition of the startup. So for instance, if when the startup is not able to continue its operation and winds up the company, then that loan would be waived off. And if the startup is not able to continue its operation, but they decide to not wind up the company, still continue and they still believe in their idea, then in that case, that loan can be converted into equity. So this is the idea of the soft loan. Now there are also private players which provide funding, seed funding to startups, like boutique investment banks. So these are small investment banks like Avendus Capital, Spark Capitals. Then crowdfunding. So as the name suggests, crowdfunding is where a startup can raise funds, small amounts of funds from the people in general. So those people can be relatives, peer groups, friends. And now there is also recent development that an app has been developed for this crowdfunding only. Then angel funds, again, angel funds are those individuals or a group of individuals who are willing to invest in a startup at a very initial stage, at a seed stage. And they are angels because they do not, they just provide funds and do not really interfere in day-to-day functioning of the startup. They just invest in them and believe in their ideas. Then in, examples is Indian Angel Network is an example of an angel fund only. Then micro VCs. So micro VCs are again small venture capitalists who invest in the startup at a seed stage. Then there are also some strategic partners so there are some traditional businesses who partner with the startups as a part of the business strategy. For example, Tata invested in Cardeco as a part of its strategy to expand its digital arm. Then Pharmacy acquired Thyrocare. Again, this acquisition was a part of their strategic move to expand, to diversify their services. So these are the strategic partners who also invest in startups. Then family offices. So family offices are basically traditional family business houses like Ratan Tata, Azim Premji, who invest in a startup at the seed stage. And a recent study has also shown that by the year 2025, about 30% of this seed funding would be funded by these family offices only. Now, how a CA can play a significant role in availing these funding is, so basically, chartered accountants are really closely associated with the banks, government officials. So they have a network. They have a vast network of people who are closely connected with government officials. So the idea is that it's very easier for the chartered accountants to get these funds availed to a startup because this network is useful to help them in help startups making aware about these funding schemes and availing the benefits of these schemes. And if we talk about these private players, so these private players have the idea of investing in the startups. So they want to invest, and they want, before investing, they want to rely on somebody who can guide them that which startup is the best bet, like in which startup they can really put their money. So for analyzing, for deciding those startups, these private players approach a finance expert or a chartered accountant to help them analyze, because a chartered accountant is closely connected to these startups from the very beginning at the idea stage, and they witness the entire growth. So these private players also approach the chartered accountants, and there is a this way they can also get these startups funded. Now the same is now we will discuss about the series funding round. So again, in case of series funding also, the same is applicable. There are government schemes as well as private players who provide, invest in this round. Now government scheme. So as we were discussing previously about the funds for startup scheme. So this scheme is an initiative of Startup India, and under this scheme, there has been again a 10,000 crore corpus fund that has been kept aside. So this scheme is mainly managed by SIDBI, and SIDBI through its venture capitals and AIFs channelize the funds in the startups. So the procedure we will discuss in the next slide about how startups can avail funds in this scheme. Now again, there are some private players also who invested in the series round. So venture capital funds are, we all are aware, venture capital funds are those institutions which invest in promising startups. So some examples are RVCF, which we were mentioning about the Rajasthan venture capitalists, Sequoia, Excel Partners. Then there are total 8,000 venture capital funds that have been registered. Then corporate venture capitals. So corporate venture capital is basically a group of multinational companies who invest in a startup as a part of their strategic move. So to acquire a target market, a talent pool, or innovative startup. So this is a part of their strategic move. And there are some corporate venture capitals like Reliance Ventures, Mahindra Partners. Then private equity firms again invest in the startups at a series funding round. Then there is one different instrument here, venture debt funds. So venture debt funds are basically a hybrid scheme of NBFCs. So what they do is they provide debt financing to startups, but they only provide debt financing to those startups that are backed by VCs. So this is a hybrid scheme which is provided by NBFCs. So again, as we were discussing in the previous slide, the role of chartered accountants in getting these benefits available to a startup is same as they have a vast network again in the government departments, in banks and everything, so they can easily provide these funding facilities to startups and also with the private players. So now this is a brief about the procedure for availing this fund of funds of SIDBI. So in this, there are different processes like eligibility, screener registration, meetings, detailed applications, due diligence. So to get a fund through this procedure, a chartered accountant or an expert is needed at all the times, at all the stages of this process to validate the process, to complete all the maybe registration formalities, documentation, diligence of a startup. So those CAs required in completing all these procedures and ultimately getting the benefit of the scheme to a startup. So now initial public offers. So mostly IPO, any company goes for an IPO in order to provide an exit strategy to the investors. So recently we have also seen a lot of loss-making companies going into IPOs like Burger King, Barbecue Nation, Paytm, Zomato, etc. So why this has happened is because of a change in a SEBI guideline. So earlier only profit-making companies could go for IPO, but now change in the SEBI guideline has allowed loss-making companies also to go for the IPO. But there's a difference between the loss-making and profit-making companies. So only in case of a profit-making company, only 35% of the shares are available to the retail public. Sorry, I think I said the other way around. So in case of a profit-making company, 35% of the retail shares are available to the public. But in case of a loss-making company, only 10% of the retail shares are available to the public. So this is a major difference. But this new guideline has allowed loss-making companies to go for IPO. Then we've also seen that through IPOs, startups have really raised a huge amount of money. So they have raised about $7.16 billion in 2021 itself. Now, what role a chartered accountant plays in this scenario is that so a finance expert or a CA is really required to get that company before going for listing. So it's not that easy. So before going for listing, there are a lot of investor stakes. So a company needs to streamline its operation. All the procedures shall be in place. The audited financials shall be issued. So in preparing the company overall, a finance expert or professional is required to gear up the company to go for that listing round. So now this is so till now we talked about the funding, different stages of funding, and how a finance professional plays an important role in different stages of funding. Now there are also so government is really promoting startups. There are also different government grants which are available to promote these startups. So we have listed down a few. So this is again not limited. There are hundreds of different grants that are provided to startups, but we'll just discuss a few to get an idea about how it is being promoted. So, for instance, Prism. So in this scheme, the government provides 5 lakhs of capital, seed capital to startups at a POC stage. Then they also provide commercialized on the commercialized model. 35 lakhs grant is provided, and in case of R&D startups, 1 crore of grant can also be provided. Then in case of the multiplier grant scheme also, up to 2 crores of grant can be provided to R&D based startups. In the same way, in all these common grants initiative, different quantum of grants is provided to the startup at different stages that we had discussed before, like be it POC stage, prototype creation stage, product trials, commercialization. So based on the different stage of the startup, different grants shall be provided to the. So also feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. We can discuss it later on, but you can reply in the chat box for now. Then there is also Atal Innovation Mission. So this is an initiative of Niti Aayog, which is in which they are promoting a startup at a very in the school only. They are promoting entrepreneurships basically to develop that mindset amongst the children for startups. So in this slide, so the thing is that again, CA plays a role in getting like passing on the benefits of these government grants to startup by being in touch with them and providing them these assistances. Major initiative for women entrepreneurs. So not just startups, but in startups also, government is taking all the steps to promote women entrepreneurs. So there are different platforms that are designed for promotion of women entrepreneurship, like a women entrepreneurship platform. This is an initiative of Niti Aayog, NASSCOM, CRISIL, FICCI. So through this platform, they provide all the incubation centers. So they provide all the acceleration programs, incubations to the women and support services, seed capital, like in whatever way they can promote women entrepreneurs, they're promoting it through these initiatives. And then there is VHub. This is an initiative of a Telangana government. Again, through this initiative, they tend to provide boost to the women entrepreneurship. Then VHub only entered into a project with Germany under the name Project Her and Now. So these all are small initiatives which are boosting the specifically women for entrepreneurship. Then based on these initiatives, and the results are really changing, because out of the total 90 startups that have converted into unicorns, 13 startups were those in which there were female founders. For instance, Byju's, Mamaearth. So these initiatives schemes have really boosted women entrepreneurship. Then a study also proves this, that businesses founded by women entrepreneurs generate higher revenue compared to businesses founded by male entrepreneurs. So this is an interesting fact. So now moving on to the conclusion slide, CAs as mentors and investors. So during this entire presentation, we have discussed about how a chartered accountant plays an important role at different stages of a startup, how they are playing really a significant role, be it at the time of seed funds, fundraising, and in availing these government grants and benefits. So chartered accountant really plays an important role in this. Now, an important message from this entire presentation is that previously CAs are traditionally providing these conventional services like auditing, related to auditing, taxation, accounting. But we need to understand that this new ecosystem, for instance, startup ecosystem, they really need guidance of a chartered accountant every now and then. So they need a finance expert to help them boost their business, to understand their business, and to provide them guidance. So this is where a CA needs to shift their area of services, provide mentorship to startups, assist them whenever and wherever required. So this is where we really need to shift. So this is an important shift, and all the chartered accountants and professionals should really be a part of this wave. So as the startup ecosystem is really booming, so we also need to gear up ourselves for this boom, and change or modify our range of services. And in return for them, we can also take a mentorship stake in these startups. Like if we, as we are closely connected to a startup from the idea stage, so we need to we might feel that we can invest in that startup and take a mentorship stake, and when the startup grows, then we also grow with them. So this is the, I think this is what all I wanted to conclude from this presentation. This is how we professionals can be connected, and we professionals can be a part of this wave. I think so. Thank you everyone for listening to me and for my opinion. And this is something which I have also shared out of my personal experience. So earlier I was working with Deloitte in transfer pricing domain, but now I am also trying to be a part of this wave by providing services to startups, by assisting them and providing mentorship wherever we can really help them. So it's a very interesting opportunity, and definitely we all should work towards it and aim towards being a part of this booming sector. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am, for such a wonderful session, and it was really informative. And you have talked in really very detail that how CAs can help with the growth of startups, and how they can play their role as the virtual CFOs in the startups, and how they can contribute in mentoring and in further growth of these startups. So I think all the participants are highly benefited from your knowledge. And if in case any participant is having any query regarding the session, then they can post it in the chat box. So
Okay.
There's one query from Ashok. Ashok ji, how to associate with the incubators?
Yeah, I saw that. So normally what happens is that incubators look forward to chartered accountants also to find, because as I was explaining it earlier, that they are also looking for CAs or finance expert who can assist them, who can mentor the startups which are registered in under those incubators. But we can also approach them directly. So we can just approach those incubators, and if the profile is fit, then obviously we can be registered under those incubations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other?
If there are no further questions,
there's one more query from Ashok ji is also. Is there any online platform from where to associate with the incubators?
No, there is no online platform as such. It's just through their website and through the market research, like what all incubators we want to register in, we can do that.
Okay. So I think that's it. So thank you very much again, ma'am, for sparing your precious time and sharing
Thank-
knowledge with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, done.